September 11th, regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law enables establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city's attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wharton Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, Blackberries, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or turned off. Kathy, roll call.
I'll do the roll, Mr. Chair. Mr. Edmonds.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Kempen.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Sanzika.
Here.
Mr. Shepke. Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Stratt.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here. All right. I think before we start tonight's meeting, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. Today being 9/11, for the families of members that were lost in that tragic event. All right, thank you. All right, we have an agenda in front of us. Do we have a motion to approve as Mr. Schultz?
Approve as prepared.
Mr. Stratt, second.
Mr. Hudson.
I'm sorry, I was daydreaming. Yes.
Mr. Kempen.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Stratt.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
All right, the August 28th special study meeting minutes have been distributed. Any questions, comments, or do I have a motion? Mr. Edmonds.
I would move to approve as published.
A second. Mr.
Second. Schultz.
Just Schultz. You've been brain dead.
Excuse me.
Catch you.
Mr. Kempen.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Stratt.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
All right, item number 4. Are there any public comments for items that are not on the current agenda? Seeing no one, let's move on to item number 5, the preliminary site plan review. File number SP 978, proposed Troy 711, the southeast corner of Crooks and Waddles, which is 3984 Crooks, section 21, currently zoned NN Neighborhood Node 1 District. Mr. Carlisle.
Good evening. The first item for review tonight is a proposed 3,200 square foot 7-Eleven building located at the corner of Crooks and Waddles. The existing 0.64 acre site is currently improved with a single family home. The site is currently zoned neighborhood node I, and this is the first parcel in the neighborhood node I to be developed under the new ordinance. The site is surrounded by single family residential to the south, east, and west, and the parcel to the north across Waddles is currently vacant. As the Planning Commission is well aware of, the intent of the neighborhood nodes are located at major intersections adjacent to single-family residential. And the intent really is to serve as commercial and mixed-use centers to service that local neighborhood itself. In particular, these corner parcels are very important to me because they kind of set the tone for development throughout the rest of the neighborhood node. In particular, these corners, it's very important that the building is placed in the appropriate location, located at the corner with the parking in the rear and to the side of the building. In addition, it's very important that we incorporate specific architectural details as required under the ordinance. So as requested, the applicant has placed the building in the appropriate location on the corner and is in fact providing an additional 7-foot wide walkway or pedestrian area located adjacently to the Crooks Road elevation. So in conclusion, the building complies with all the requirements of the building Form A dimensional requirements as part of the form-based district. In regards to site access, there are 2 points of access proposed. One is off Wattles and one is off Crooks. These points of access have been reviewed by the Traffic Engineering Department, and they do not have any concerns regarding site access. And in addition, we do feel that the development of this site will encourage development of adjacent parcels. That being the fact, we've encouraged the applicant, or in essence required the applicant to provide us with cross-access easements to both the south and the east, and the applicant has provided those access points or future access easements. We're currently in discussions with the provision of a performance guarantee to get these things constructed in the future when the time comes, and that's something that will work with the applicant prior to site plan approval and not necessarily under the purview right now of the Planning Commission as a whole. In regards to pedestrian access, there is an existing sidewalk on Wattles. Based on the review of the Engineering Department, the Engineering Department has asked the applicant to not make any changes to that proposed sidewalk as it currently exists unless it gets damaged during the construction period, but keep it as is. The applicant is providing a new sidewalk on Crooks, and the recommendation of the Engineering Department is to ensure that all new sidewalks tie into the existing sidewalk, especially at that intersection. A new sidewalk was located at that intersection, was recently built at that intersection up to city standards, so just ensuring that the new sidewalk ties into that sidewalk. In regards to parking, 13 spots are required by code. The applicant is providing 14 parking spaces as well as two bicycle parking spaces, so they comply with parking standards. The applicant has provided a sufficient number and amount of landscaping. However, due to overhead utilities as well as underground utilities on Crooks Road, the applicant is deficient by 1 tree along the Crooks Road elevation. But we believe, again, this is something that the Planning Commission should grant relief for because due to these underground utilities and overground utilities. The applicant has submitted a photometric plan. The plan does meet all requirements. However, we do ask that the applicant clarify that the building lighting is proposed is a fully cut off fixture that does comply with our ordinance. In addition, the applicant is willing to reduce the lights after 11 p.m. as also required by ordinance. In regards to design standards, as I noted, design standards are very important for the neighborhood node buildings, specifically these corner buildings. The development within this neighborhood node must comply with the design standards listed in Section 5.06E. And this is in regards to building orientation at entrance, ground story activation, transitional features, site access, and parking. The applicant does meet all these requirements. So in summary, we do support the project and recommend approval. I believe in our staff report we did recommend that they come back with addressing of 5 of these issues. However, in future discussions, in subsequent discussions with the applicant, we do find that they do meet these findings, other than the clarification in regard to the building light fixture and reducing the lights between the hours of 11 o'clock at night. So with that being said, we do support the proposed application and find that these items can be addressed by the applicant and us administratively.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Is a petitioner in the audience? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Josh Knott. I work with Harrison French and Associates, and I'm representing the engineer and the architect for 7-Eleven and for Verdad, the developer on the project. As Ben mentioned, we've been working with Ben and Brent over the past several weeks on the project, and they've been very helpful in helping us to address all the issues and the site layout requirements for the zoning, and we really appreciate the help that the city's provided in this regards. The only, I guess, concern that we have had out of all of the list is we feel that we've adequately addressed all of the items that were mentioned, with the exception of the lighting. And that's the one concern that we do have, is in regards to the site lighting. We can confirm that the fixtures are full cut off, and we'll provide all the information for that as well, that they do meet all those requirements for fully shielded and full cut off fixtures. But the one concern is in regards to having the lights dim between the hours of 11 p.m. and sunrise. And the reason for this is that this will be a 24-hour store, as all of 7-Eleven convenience stores are. And with that, of course, there's concern with the safety for both the customers as well as the employees at the site. We feel that the photometrics plan that was provided shows that there is no spillover of the lights onto adjacent properties that would cause any concern. But the request to have the lights actually dimmed, we feel will cause a safety concern within the parking area for the customers as well as for the employees. And that's the one item that we're hesitant to say we can meet at this point, and was hoping to discuss that a little further. Brent had mentioned that it was, or Ben rather had mentioned it was part of the ordinance. Does it specify like how, in what way they are to be dimmed, or how much?
It doesn't. Excuse me. It does not actually give a foot candle requirement for the dimming. Exceptions can be granted when lighting levels is necessary due to security or safety purposes, and or if it's a commercial entity that's open 24 hours. There are cases where you don't have to turn off the lights, but you just do have to reduce them. But there's no foot candle measurement for the reduction.
Yeah, what we would like to request, of course, is with these fixtures that we're proposing, that we'll show you as well. They do meet dark sky requirements. They are fully shielded and cut off fixtures, and as the photometric shows, there is no spillover. But we would like to request that that requirement to dim the lights not be something that's stipulated to this project due to the 24-hour use and the safety concern that we have there.
I was looking, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Edmonds, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Mr. Savina, this is not the only 7-Eleven. Does the current 7-Eleven at John R. and Long Lake, is that dim? Do they dim their lights after 11?
I don't know for sure, but I will take an educated guess and say that they do not. This is a very recent standard in the ordinance. Our lighting provisions were almost non-existent in the previous ordinance. They've been significantly strengthened. So I would say that offhand, I don't believe there are any fast food or 24-hour facilities in the city that I'm aware of that dim. I don't know of any. But you got to start somewhere, but he makes a compelling argument.
Mr. Stratt?
Yeah, my screen is blank, but aside from that, I don't recall when I was reviewing the site plan that the photometrics were part of the submission that I saw. Were they a part of the submission?
There was a full set.
The photometrics.
Photometric plan was submitted as part of the application. I can't speak to whether or not Planning Commission received it.
Why don't we have it?
I don't believe it's in the...
I know we've got a checklist, and why don't we have the cutoffs? Why don't we have the things that we are required as far as the...
Well, if I can answer that question, Mr. Stratt, it was an oversight on my part that we have them in when I put the electronic packet together, I neglected to include photometrics.
Is there any way you can fix mine?
I can come and look at it.
I do have a copy, of course, that we could pass around for everyone. And just some things we might point out too is, I know everyone's probably aware of like a typical Walmart store or Target where those type of parking lots typically have around 5-foot candles. This parking lot, as you'll notice when you look at this, the highest point in one area in the middle of the parking lot is a 3-foot candle, so it's significantly less. And these LED lights do not cast the type of lights that most people are used to. I'll be happy to pass this around if you'd like.
What's your lowest foot candle level and what's your average?
Let's see, the average, it looks like, is 0.7 at grade level. The maximum is 3.9. So,
Yes, Mr. Krantz.
Do you have a photograph, a sample of sheets on those fixtures so we can review those?
yeah, I sure do.
I'd like to see that before I make any more comments on it.
Mr. Hudson?
Well, I'm going to make a comment before Mr. Krantz
Yeah.
gets his photometrics in. I think we're probably talking semantics when we're using the word dim. I think the intent of that ordinance was to provide the neighboring residents some assurance that it's not going to be daylight in their backyard. Now, if your photometrics, come under that umbrella so that it's not like daylight in the backyard, I don't think you have to worry about the word dim. I think our concern is spreading of lights.
Mr. Stratt?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment again, though. I really want to compliment you on your stormwater retention as far as your interest in retaining water, which I thought was really pretty good. So I wanted to compliment you on that as well.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Schultz.
Couple comments. One, kind of tongue-in-cheek, looking at your facade or your facade drawings. Unless you're moving crooks and wattles, you have the north and the west elevations reversed. Because Crooks is not on the north side of the building. That's minor. The only other observation I would have is that 3 sides of the building have the aluminum canopy, but the south side, which is going to be extremely visible to northbound traffic on Crooks Road, is the only side of the building that does not have the canopy over the windows. And I personally think the building would look better if it had that canopy on the south side as well as all the other sides. And I agree with what Mr. Hudson said about lighting, especially if it's going to be LED lighting. LED lighting is not usually as intense. Outdoor lighting is not as intense as like what we see currently in gas stations and that sort of thing, where you get this blinding island of light. So.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I've got a hard copy, 24 by 36 of the photometric plan. I can provide anyone who wants to look at it.
Mr. Sanzica?
I'd like to echo Mr. Stratt's comments on the stormwater. It's I've never seen a site without any catch basins or any underground pipe in it, and it's handled very well. And I think that's the whole intent of at least our board, that we go with more of a greener infrastructure in stormwater management. And it's an excellent job. I'm sure the engineering department will review it to make sure it holds 2 100-year storms, 1 100-year storm. I'm not sure exactly what the standard is, but they did an excellent job, and I think it's well done.
Thank you.
Mr. Krantz?
Just to follow up on the light fixtures. This fixture looks similar to the ones I've seen on Southfield Expressway, and they are LED. Again, the light intensity at the ground is rather low. The LEDs don't have a really high intense output, but they have an incredibly rotten glare effect. If you're driving on Southfield Expressway, I said, this is the first time I've seen LEDs on an expressway, and they are blinding. Is there a fixture that would have a kind of a shield to prevent that, that LED blast into your eyes as you're driving by?
Yeah, I believe that they do have an add-on that can be, included here. The intent of this design is as a cut-off fixture, but understanding what you're saying, maybe something that comes down even further. The only effect that may have, of course, is the broadcast on the ground that's trying to be achieved currently, of course, by the photometrics.
It's just that these are relatively new fixtures, and when anything comes out new, there's going to be some adjustments to be made by the manufacturers after they get complaints. And because it's such a new item, that's my only. Everything else in the project I've reviewed looks super, but I've been blinded by those on Southfield Expressway, so I just thought I'd mention that. Okay. You can somehow shield that from drivers. It'd be great.
Yeah, and I think one thing that may help is the height on these poles, which I don't have mine in front of me now, but it's, of course, they're not nearly that height that you're probably used to, of course, on the expressway, so that will help. And then also with the greenery and the trees that we'll have on this site, it should really help to create that buffer area for the drivers. So.
Hope so.
Okay.
I was going to ask you what the height of the lights are.
Yeah, it's on my photometrics I gave away. I believe it's around 14 or 15 feet, maybe
17.
17. Okay. Does that include the base, I guess, with overall height? So
Overall height would be 20.
okay. So,
Base height equals 3 feet, pole height equals 17.
Any other comments or questions, Mr. Edmond?
I'm just really pleased that this is like the first commercial development that we've got in this neighborhood node, and I too compliment the developer. It's a great plan.
Yes, Mr. Kempen.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. I think that it's a very good use of in this corner here as well. It'll help develop community as a walkable area and stuff. I know I live northeast of the 7-Eleven at Long Lake and John R., and it winds up being a community destination, in particular during the warm weather. So and also when you're coming home after long trips and stuff like that. So I think the community will be very happy to have something like that around. So.
good.
Nice building.
Mr. Carlo, did you have a comment or question?
The only thing I want to say is that the applicant has some wiggle room in terms of the light intensity of that 3.7 or 3.9, whatever the maximum was. So if you do need to increase your maximum in order to reduce some of the glare, as Mr. Kren raised, you have some wiggle room to do that with your photometrics.
Any other questions or comments? The only thing I'd like to add, as you've already heard, I think you guys have done a nice job with this development. I think it'll be a very nice addition to the corner. When you do look at your lighting, I would take a look and see if you can lower those poles a little bit without getting hot spots, you know, in the parking lot and getting your average to high to low too far off. But 20 foot is getting pretty tall on the site, so.
Yeah, I think we can look at some of those options, and as Mr. Krent mentioned, also maybe even some further shielding. The main concern was keeping the light levels the same, of course, due to the 24-hour use. So we'll be happy to look at that.
All right. Well, entertain a motion from someone. Mr. Sanzica?
Be happy to. Move that, or we resolve that the preliminary site plan pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Troy 7-Eleven located on the southeast corner of Crooks and Waddles, Section 21 within the North NN Neighborhood Node District be granted subject to the following conditions. One, that they address the required site plan information identified in the report prior to final site plan approval, and two, that they review the site lighting requirements and the work with staff regarding the dimming of the fixtures.
I have a second?
Can I clarify?
Yes.
Regarding dimming of the fixtures, you mean the hot spot? The light source?
The dimming of the night lights after 11 p.m.
They don't want to do that.
Well, that's my point. I guess, all right, let me change it, that they not be required to dim the lights after 11 p.m.
I just want a clarification.
No, that's fine.
Perfect.
I didn't state it correctly. Thank you.
Support.
Mr. Edmonds? Mr. Savinan? Or is Kat? Who's doing the roll?
I'll do it. Okay. Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Kempen?
Yes.
All right. Well, you've got your approvals.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Savinan?
Just a note, these applicants were very easy to work with. It's always appreciated.
Good, good. All right, next item is conditional rezoning request. Conditional rezoning application file number CR 006. The proposed Troy Plaza, west side of Crook, south of Square Lake, 5500 New King, Section 8 from PUD 13, Planned Unit Development 13, to community business and OM office mixed use districts. Mr. Carlisle.
Well, we're back again with this. This is a project that the Planning Commission and the applicant are well aware of where we've come and where we are now. The applicant is requesting a conditional rezoning. In addition, as part of that, a special use permit as well as a preliminary site plan review. My report was rather lengthy, and so I'm going to break up my presentation into really 3 or 4 separate parts. The first part is just a background on what the applicant's proposing. Essentially, they're asking for a 2-phase development. The first phase is a conditional rezoning of the front of the site to CM. This is the front of the site that fronts on Crooks Road. And as part of that, the applicant is asking for a drive-through McDonald's, a mixed-use building with a drive-through, as well as a corner restaurant / potentially retail building in that corner location. As part and parcel of that, the applicant is asking for a site plan approval for that portion, as well as special use approval for the drive-through for the McDonald's, as well as the drive-through for the retail building. The second phase of the development, which is a future phase of the development, is a conditional rezoning to OM, which is the office mixed-use building. The applicant has the future use of that parcel or that portion of the development hasn't been determined, but one of the conditions of approval was it will either be a hotel use or an office use. This will also require a future site plan and site plan approval from the Planning Commission as part of the conditional rezoning. If it is a hotel use requires a special use, so again, that will be handled as part of the site plan review. But again, for right now, he's asking for a conditional rezoning for the front part to CM or CB and the back part to office mixed use. In regards to the conditional rezoning, the conditions that the applicant has proposed in regards to the CB zoning for the portion that fronts on Crook are as follows. The site plan as submitted, an immediate development of the first 2 buildings, associated parking aisles and drive aisles, the development of the building, development of the parking, the building pad, and the associated drive aisle for the corner building corner building restaurant / retail building. The corner building will be marketed to a restaurant, and however, if that is not feasible, it will not be marketed to a bank and or chain drugstore. The building footprint and building elevations will be submitted at a later date for administrative approval. And the mixed-use drive-through building will expire once the first tenant of occupancy expires at that time. In regards to the conditions for the development portion of the OM site, the uses will be limited to hotel and office, and a site plan review will be required when the final use is determined. And prior to development and prior to approval, the developer will provide the city with a traffic and parking analysis in relation to the proposed development. We did note 3 items in the report for clarification in regards to the condition. In future or subsequent discussions with the applicant, he did clarify a lot of our issues and concerns, so we do not have any proposed or changes or any concerns with the conditions as proposed by the applicant. However, when considering rezoning, rezoning should be considered under section 16.04C of the ordinance, and this talks about protection of public health, safety, and welfare, compliance with the master plan. Conditions proposed are consistent with the zoning district, provision of public utilities, as well as compatibility with adjacent uses. Other than addressing a few small, minor site plan issues that we have, we do support the proposed conditional rezoning and find the applicant does meet these outlined standards. Now, looking specifically at the site plan just for the CB portion, this again has been reviewed with the Planning Commission a multitude of times, and we do applaud the applicant for meeting with us at the last Planning Commission meeting and really coming up with what we feel, as well as the traffic engineer consultant, Mr. Deering from OHM, feels is a much better designed site. Some of the changes that the applicant has proposed as part of this revision, which we believe both increase site connectivity as well as provide for better and safe circulation, is they've rearranged the internal curbing in drive aisles, and this is especially in relation to where the mixed-use drive-through is being proposed. As part of that, when they initially came in, they were deficient in terms of the number of stacking spaces. They have now brought this up to at least 10 stacking spaces, which complies with the ordinance requirements. They have removed parking in front of the mixed-use building and replaced with outdoor seating. Again, this is a common outdoor seating area that really does provide a public benefit and an amenity to the site as well as the surrounding area. They have compartmentalized the parking areas with curbing and landscaping to really provide better circulation and site orientation as well. They've consolidated trash and loading areas to 2 specific locations on the site. And in our opinion, these changes do provide greater integration and site cohesiveness. Specifically in regards to parking, the applicant is providing 221 spaces. They're asking for relief to provide 11 of those spaces as land bank spaces. So they will be providing 210 spaces for this first phase of development. We find that parking is sufficient. However, not necessarily an issue for the Planning Commission to consider, but the applicant should be aware that the future restaurant, if it's a future restaurant, is limited to a maximum of 190 seat parking or 190 seat restaurant, which again is a rather large size restaurant, but those are the limitations that the applicant would work under. If they do exceed that number, they can come in to the Planning Commission and show evidence as to why parking is sufficient if they do want to have a restaurant that's slightly larger than that 190 seats, but the applicant should be aware of that. In regards to building placement and setbacks, they do conform to all the CB district requirements, and we have no issues with where the buildings are placed. The applicant has provided a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees and shrubs, and they do greatly exceed all the landscaping requirements on the site. The applicant has submitted a full photometric and lighting plan. The plan does comply with all requirements. We do offer a few items that were asked to be addressed, and the applicant has done that subsequent to our consideration. One is the pole height is limited to 25 feet. This is compliant with the zoning ordinance. The applicant has agreed to reduce the hours of illumination after 11 p.m. as required by ordinance. And lastly, there is no proposed building lighting. The only lighting on the building will be signage as allowed under the sign ordinance. In regards to floor plans and elevation, these were submitted. These were reviewed under section 4.03 point D, which is the supplemental design standards in the ordinance. These talk about facade variation, pedestrian entrance and access, off-street parking location, and we find that the elevations do comply with all these standards. In regards to standards, there are specific standards for drive-throughs both as a special use as well as a supplemental use. In regards to the use standards, these are defined in section 6.10 of the ordinance. These regard to ingress and egress to the drive-through, location at the side or rear of the building, as well as sufficient stacking spaces for 10 spaces for restaurant uses. Both the drive-throughs do comply with these requirements. In regards to special use standards, these are outlined in section 9.02D, and these talk about the compatibility with adjacent uses, the compatibility with the master plan, potential traffic impacts, impacts on public services, compliance with zoning standards, circulation, hours of operation, and secondary impacts. Again, for both of these special uses, the retail building, drive-through, and McDonald's, we find that these also comply with all of these special use standards. So in summary, we do support the proposed project. We find that it meets the zoning requirements as well as the intent of the ordinance, and it meets the master plan requirements as well. We do recommend to the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council regarding the conditional rezoning, and that should be contingent upon the recommendation that the Planning Commission approve the site plan and special uses. Again, contingent upon the Planning Commission approving, the City Council approving the conditional rezoning.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions for Mr. Carl, Mr. Savedon?
Not a question, just I don't know if Ben, if I'm repeating what you said, I apologize. After our last meeting, myself, Ben, Bill Hootery, the city's transportation engineer, and Steve Deering from OHM sat down with Mr. Gordon, and we basically tweaked the site. It was a very productive meeting, and there was just some minor tweaks that were done. The site is so much more intuitive and clean, looks a little somewhat less engineered, which is ironic when two engineers make some tweaks. But I commend Mr. Gordon on his responsiveness. It's a really nice layout.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Stratton?
Yeah, you mentioned that it complies with the setback requirements. I couldn't find any drawings that had any indication of what the dimensions were on the whole entire site. Especially, I'm concerned about the proposed restaurant on the south side. At least it's not on any of our drawings that we have, I think.
Well, I did receive a site plan that was scalable, and I scaled off the distances, and they do comply with the requirements under the ordinance. I don't know what was submitted in your packet and what you received.
Okay.
Again.
I was particularly concerned about the one on the south end, the building on the south end, which is the proposed restaurant, where it's shown there, and I couldn't see where the setback was required on that. I assume because of the distance, the way that they seem both buildings line up off Crooks Road, it appears that they probably are in conformance. But I don't know what that setback is. Supposedly it's supposed to be indicated on the drawings as it relates to the check sheet, but none of that's on here.
Well, the reason why it might look like it's set back is the setback on Corporate Drive is pretty far. It's pretty far off, actually, the pavement of Corporate Drive, so it looks like it's farther set back than.
Well, I don't know where the property line is. You know, it's off the property line, right?
Yes, it's the required distance on the property line, but the property line is set back pretty far from the road itself.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was looking at the survey, the current survey that was given as far as the existing. The property line is edged with, obviously, the sidewalk, 1 foot outside of the sidewalk. So that's why I was concerned about that. Looked like it was right on the edge.
Tom, are you concerned with the setback off of Corporate Drive?
Yeah, that's what but I don't know. I don't know what the setbacks are off there or what the dimension is, other than perhaps scaling it as indicated was done. But I would think that this being construction documents, I would assume they would have some dimensions on that if we are to approve it.
Mr. Carlisle, did you happen to have that in your report? You usually have little tables in there about what the setbacks are. And
I'm looking for it right now.
Look at sheet SB2. There's a key plan that shows all the setbacks. That lower left corner has all the setbacks. Front setback.
Yeah.
10 feet. Side setback 20. It's all on there.
Yeah, it is on the plan, as well as.
What sheet? SP2?
It's that lower corner drawing on SB2.
Yes. In addition, if you refer to our report on page 6, we speak about setbacks, and it does meet all the required setbacks as well. If you look it's up in the left-hand corner on SB2, as well as page 6 of our report are the setback dimensions.
I guess my question is what is the setback off of Corporate Drive, and does that building setback in accordance with the setback off Corporate Drive?
The setback is 10 feet, and the applicant is setting it back to 10 feet on Corporate.
Okay.
And the reason it looks, the reason it looks so far back is because the right-of-way itself is rather large on Corporate Drive, and there's a lot of parkways.
I'm looking at it as it relates to the sidewalk, not as to the street, which is where the property line is.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? The applicant present would like to come up and share some thoughts.
I'm Mike Gordon from Moisey Gordon Associates Architects.
Nice to see you again.
Good seeing you again. With me is Iman Citro, the engineer. Again, I think we had really productive meetings, and I'd like to thank both Brett and Ben. And we've listened to everyone's concerns, including your concerns, and we feel that we've incorporated them into the drawings, and I think it's reflected in his report. We think the refined plan before you addresses everyone's needs and desires. The site will have a vibrant mix of small office, retail, restaurant at several price points, and the future hotel. And the good news is I think all indications are I'll be coming back to you before the end of the year with the hotel. We've got some really good traffic. I mean, it's once you get to a certain point, the marketing follows. The hotel office site will be so designated, and we had discussions today. We wanted to clarify that we will designate it only as an office or a hotel. The retail site or the future restaurant, we want to keep that with anything that's allowed in the zoning because we understand the market. We feel, though, at the price point of the development, the only viable options there are high-end retail or a full-service restaurant because of the cost of development of the site, that a lesser use would not be able to afford to be there. We have also clarified the additional questions from Ben and feel the site will add a dynamic, vibrant component to the intersection. And we look forward to your support on this. I think we've heard a lot of information tonight. His report was very thorough. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Grant?
Mr. Gordon, I've got a quick question for you. I compared both of the SP2 drawings, the earlier one and the one presented today, and yes, there's a vast improvement, especially on the south side as far as traffic flow. I agree. My only comment is you've changed the, this is referring to the restaurant on the southern area. You've changed the location of the perpendicular parking to that restaurant, or perpendicular parking to that restaurant, from the restaurant side to the opposite side of the traffic. And, you know, looking at that, again, I don't have a point or anything, but you've got the flow going through here and around, which is nice. It gives a nice circulation. I like that. And I tried placing this down here and then working with the dumpster and figuring out, have you looked seriously about moving that back and still keeping that flow?
Well, that was based on the recommendation of your traffic and planning engineer. He said flip the parking to the other side, which resolves any potential conflict with the drive-through. And we talked to our marketing people, and they said we have no problem with where the parking is because it's a really low, we feel that the majority of traffic will be north-south, as that's going to be a very low impact area. And the drive-through component is more of a day, morning, and the restaurant we hope to develop there will be more afternoon, evening. So we didn't feel that was a conflict, and that was based on the engineering recommendation to flip the parking to the north side of that drive.
And maybe I should address it to our engineering why they did that, because, you know, that way you keep the flow of cars, both flow of cars together, and keep the pedestrians separate.
There's a conflict of the right turn out of the drive-through.
Oh, they can turn right out of the
Yes.
drive-through. Didn't know that. Okay. So people have to be cautious going across that way. Okay.
Mr. Schultz.
First question, you just made a comment that you want to have the ability to put anything in the, quote, future restaurant building that's allowed under the zoning, but we have a letter here from you that says that will not be marketed to banks or chain drugstores.
Well, that's correct. I'm sorry, that one limitation will not be marketed. Two limitations.
And the only other thing, and I'm not a landscape architect, but from personal experience, I love your landscape plan, but you got a lot of boxwood, and boxwood's not real salt tolerant, and in the middle of the parking lot, it's probably not going to survive.
Okay, I'll speak to my landscape and architect about that.
Boxwood's beautiful, but it doesn't stand up to winter terribly well.
Mr. Edmonds.
Well, there are some really new varieties that are.
Are there?
Okay. I actually have some. But, no, I was really pleased. Could you elaborate a little bit about what trees you are keeping there on that southeast corner? Because there were some really large trees. Are any of those going to be retained?
We're going to try to retain them. The site has a lot of challenges, and until we get the end user for that pad, is it a rectangular building? Is it oblong? Is it square? Is it 3,000 or 6,000 square feet? That will be addressed at the next site plan level when we come in. We're going to maintain everything that's in the footprint of the building and the restaurant area for now, and then we will hopefully come back with a more detailed preservation plan for that.
I thought it was a really great plan, and I like the idea that looks like, at least to the architectural rendering that you're looking at, retaining the view of that retention pond down there.
Absolutely.
And, even a waterfall. I think that sounds great. Very great. And really impressive plant list, too, by the way.
Very much so.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Stratton.
Yeah, I may be wrong, but I was looking at your photometric plan. Go back to the comments that were earlier made to the other project. The cuts on the lighting. Is there any submission on that? Do we know what we're getting, and what is the height of the poles?
Yes, the poles are 25 foot, and there was a cut sheet submitted, and it is all LEDs. Now, of course, since we do not adjoin any form of residential, north, south, east, or west, the site is more internally illuminated, and with the broad spectrum of the distance to the intersection, and with a 25-foot limited pole, that really shouldn't be much of an issue. Yeah.
Well, my problem is this, that your eye will dilate to the actual source. And the whole idea behind all this, and the reason why most municipalities want shields, is so that you cannot see the light source, but you can actually see the level of lighting on the ground. 25 foot is highway lighting. And if you drive down Big Beaver and that's what you see is highway lighting, and those are very, very offensive. And you see on any highway that 25, 35, 45 foot pole. That is not really, in my opinion, in my opinion. I feel very offended by the light source. My eyes dilate on that, and that's the one thing you don't want to do. You can't see anything beyond that. And that distracts from the entire intent of what I think we are trying to, I think our system, or what we wanted to do with our zoning ordinance, was to create that low intensity. So, sorry that...
Okay, we certainly comply with the ordinance. The 25-foot maximum is allowed.
Listen,
So,
most engineers will go with 45 feet if they can get away with it.
Okay, I
because it's
understand.
fewer light poles, and it's more economical, but it's not really very pleasant aesthetically.
Okay, understood.
Mr. Schultz.
I don't know.
Question for Mr. Savinant. The restaurant building, as it is being described, it would come back to your department for administrative approval. Is that correct, according to the letter we have? That would not be an additional site plan, but an administrative approval by the planning department?
Let me reread that provision of the letter, Mr. Schultz.
Item C.
I'm trying to multitask here. I'm not being very successful at it either.
I'm frequently not either.
Yeah, that just to bring Mr. Carl, we're going to have a candid conversation, via the microphone. This is what we agreed upon in our meetings with the petitioner at our last meeting, correct, as administrative?
Yes, because the actual pad itself and the site plan will not change, only the building footprint within that pad would slightly change. And so in discussions with the applicant, the site plan won't change, so the elevations as well as the footprint can come in for administrative approval.
So am I hearing that the parking as it's laid out in the site plan that we're looking at tonight will not change, but the shape of the building within the shaded area can? Is that what I'm hearing, or are you going to have administrative approval to redesign the parking lot also?
It's not intended for the parking to change.
Correct.
Can you just tell me, what is the square footage of that pad as shown on the drawings?
The outline of the footprint of the building is 6,000 square feet, including the outdoor dining space is about 10,000.
So when we talk about building pad, are we talking about, and I'm really directing this to Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savinant, are we talking about the 6,000, or are we talking about the additional area with the outdoor dining? I guess I'm just trying to define what is the building pad, because as Mr. Schultz has said, if we're going to work within that box, that's one thing, but I don't know that that leaves the developer much flexibility. I mean, could it be a little narrower, longer? I don't know.
I would think that the applicant would want some flexibility to have some design leeway with not only the building but also the outdoor seating area. So it would incorporate not only the 6,000 square feet for the building but also the outdoor seating area.
Okay. Well, I think when a motion is made, that we have to make that clear that it's not just the building pad, because that's all the drawings reference that rectangle as the building pad. Mr. Stratt, did you have another comment?
I just wanted to follow up on a comment as it relates to lighting. You said that the light fixtures were submitted, the cuts were submitted. Do they have shields on them? Are they box lights, or what are they?
They're fully shielded. I have to look.
In the future, I hope that we would get these part of our pack.
According to the plans, they are fully shielded and then we comply with the ordinance.
Don't you have their fully? Oh, the LEDs as well. Yeah, the same. Is there a shield on those? Can you get a shield on those?
We probably could. I'll talk to my lighting consultant. If you want to make it a stipulation to change the
They're
lighting.
not fully shielded. They're not boxed.
Flat lens.
The flat lens.
They're not fully shielded. But, okay.
You make that a stipulation of.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Thank you, and thank you for your diligence and hard work on this. Appreciate it. All right, any more discussion? Are we ready for a motion? Mr. Schultz.
Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommend to the City Council that the PUD to OM and CB conditional rezoning as per Section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the west side of Crooks Road, north side of New King, 5500 New King in Section 8, being approximately 6 acres in size, be granted subject to the following. The application is consistent with the master plan, the application is compatible with existing zoning districts and land uses, and the applicant has proposed conditions that reduce the potential impacts of the proposed CB and OM districts on abutting properties.
Any discussion on the motion?
Is there an ad for full shielding of the fixtures?
Not from me.
Okay.
I have a question. In item number 3, where it says the applicant has proposed conditions, are we referring to the letter? Can we make reference by date to that letter? Mr. Schultz, would you agree to that?
Yes, I would, but the letter that I have in my hand is dated May 18th, so I think there may have been an item G added to it and the date was not changed.
No, look above that.
Oh,
going up.
Okay, the revised September 11 letter, correct.
Did you also want to clarify the issue with the future restaurant building pad?
I think that's important, that if we're talking about the building pad and the plaza, that is what the developer, that's the parameters the developer has to work within, as opposed to just the building pad.
So how would you like that stated?
Well, maybe we could say something to the, well, let's see, what's his letter say? Item C, no, where was that?
It would be letter C in his letter. The details of the building and building pad shall be subject.
Including the
building pad.
Including the outdoor plaza.
Outdoor plaza, yes.
Right.
Thank you. Shall be subject to, yes.
Does that work, Mr. Schultz?
Yeah, whatever he said.
Kathy, could you read that back? Just
Good luck with that.
I think I have to go to see the details of the building, including outdoor plaza. Is that going to be one of the conditions as listed as C on the revised letter?
Yes.
Well, again, do we want to use the word building pad and outdoor plaza?
How about if I could make a proposal?
Certainly can.
How about we stipulate that the building designated restaurant shall have administrative approval provided it does not alter the current parking scheme, at which time it comes back to the Planning Commission.
That works as well, I think. Any other thoughts on that or comment? Ben, Brent, are you good with that?
We can clarify this in the conditional rezoning agreement. We've heard what you've said. We've got the letter. We've got the resolution. We can. Okay. I'm comfortable with this moving forward.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Edmonds.
I don't know how critical this shield is to these outdoor lights. If the developer has offered to look into that, I think that should be part of the resolution also.
Well, again, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think we're getting into an area that is, beyond the zoning ordinance requires certain things, and if the light fixtures comply with the ordinance requirements, maybe what we need to be doing is looking at ordinance requirements and beefing them up. But that's certainly up to the discretion of the Planning Commission if they want to make that condition as part of the motion.
I thought with conditional rezoning that we can require additional conditions.
Yes, you can, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that anybody around this table knows exactly what we're asking them to do and what the results of what we're asking them to do are really going to be. But, yeah, Mr. Stratt.
Yeah, well, we've asked the previous gas station that's on Crooks and Long Lake. Crooks and South Boulevard. And that was one of the questions, and that was one of the stipulations that we made to them, is that they shield the light source. I don't know why we're not able to do that now. I think that's part of our zoning ordinance to protect the integrity of the entire city as people drive through and around the city. And that's our charge. And I think that's part of it. I totally agree with what was said before. So I don't see where that should not be a part of. If we're asking for photometrics, that is a part of the same concept as far as I'm concerned.
It is, and when the petitioner submits a full cutoff light fixture, I believe that fulfills the requirements of the ordinance. Now, if we want to engineer this and say that, you know what, it's still too bright.
What is the purpose of our asking for cuts on the light fixtures if that isn't the purpose of it?
To see the lighting levels on the ground.
Well, you can have any kind of lights. We don't need the fixture in order to make sure that the light level. But I think the reason for the purpose of getting a cut is for that purpose, specifically for that purpose, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Hudson.
This is a tempest in a teapot. We've got a beautiful project, and it's taken us all a long time to get to this point. And now we're discussing shades on lamps. And it seems to me that this is not in an area of a residential neighborhood. And it's a commercial area. It's the entrance to I-75. And whether we've got shades or not on the lights, I think it's irrelevant. I think the developer and the architect in good faith are going to come back with the photometrics, and we should make our decision, or he should, based on the photometrics, and not whether we're going to engineer a lighting fixture.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Any more discussion on the motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think for the beautiful quality of a development you're providing, I think from your own standpoint, you'd want people to come into that place in the evening and not get a harsh reaction to their eyes. And I think, I'm just going to say, I'm willing to go along with the motion we've got, but I'm going to leave it up at this point to you to make it so that your customers are really happy to stop at your site and don't get blasted in their eyeballs.
Mr. Sabadan or Ms. Lancaster? I saw both hands go up.
One of us.
The problem with conditional rezoning is that you can't make conditions on it. They can only offer it. So what Mr. Krentz said was basically, if you want to do it, we'd appreciate it, and that's acceptable. But you can't make it, if you make it, he has to offer it. You can't make it part of the condition. So if he wants to do it and you can suggest to him he might want to look into that, it's up to him, but you can't require it as part of your conditional rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Sabadan.
Mr. Gordon has very good hearing, and he's a very intelligent guy. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, he knows as much or more about lighting and about all the things we've talked about, and he's paying attention, and we'll see what comes forward.
All right. Now,
one more comment I want to make.
Yes,
okay?
Mr. Stratton.
I just want to say one thing. This is a great development, and I respect what you've done, and you worked very, very hard, and I'm voting for it. So I just want you to know that. I appreciate what you've done. I don't mean to be putting any flags up against you, okay?
And I just want to say, I think the group is,
We've listened to all of you, and we listened to everyone on staff, and you can see the changes we've made to date. So.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Edmonds, did you have a comment, Mr. Edmonds?
Do we have a second for this motion?
Not yet.
I certainly support it.
Okay. Mr.
Since no one at this table is a lighting engineer, could we call the question and get this off the table, please?
Well, I think we just got a second.
We just did.
Who's doing the roll call?
I'll do it. Mr. Edmonds seconded it, correct?
Right.
Thank you. Mr. Sanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Kempen?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Congratulations.
thank you. I look forward to seeing you again soon with
We the same.
rest of the development.
All right. Moving on now to other business. Any public comments for items on the current agenda? Seeing none, we'll go around the dais for Planning Commission comments. Ms. Lancaster, we'll start with you.
Nothing. Thank you.
Just a general statement. Potential. It looks promising that there's going to be quite a significant amount of investment on Crooks Road, a mile and a half from. These two sites are both on Crooks Road. I think that bodes well for the Northfield area. I mean, there's a lot of vacant office space up there, and I think this is a really positive step in the right direction for this area.
Mr. Hudson?
Nothing.
No. Mr. Kempen?
No.
Mr. Stratt?
Yeah, I have one comment to make. Today's my birthday. You guys will never forget it, right? I'm 32 years old today, okay?
That was it?
Wrong direction, Tom.
That's it. I'm looking for your comment.
No comment.
Mr. Edmonds?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Sanzika?
No comment.
Mr. Carlisle? Eric?
9/11.
About the 7-Eleven, I also think it's a good idea because I've been on cross country for 2 years, and the only 7-Eleven I've gone to is the one off of like Big Beaver down there. So this one's closer.
Just a couple thoughts we may want to consider. I don't know the exact wording in our ordinance regarding lighting pole heights. Maybe we should make sure that it's talking about the maximum height of the light fixture, because when we talk about the poles, there's always most of the times, there's a base added to that.
I just shut off my computer, but I believe it does include the base in that 25-foot maximum.
So when we're saying, we're not really saying pole height, we're saying maximum light.
Maximum, it's maximum pole height with bases included.
Okay, okay.
It's
yeah.
It's 25 feet is the maximum height in commercial districts.
Including the base.
Including the base.
Okay. There seem to be a couple, now, and Brent, I'm not picking on you because of the photometrics thing, but do we get everything that the petitioner submits to you as far as the catalog cut of the light fixture or poles or all of that, if it's not on the drawings?
If you're not getting it, it's because I had to work. Well, I'm not going to make an excuse. I dropped the ball, but yes, we do.
Okay.
I told Mr. Stratt I would do my best to get that information in the site plan packet, and I failed, Mr. Stratt. So I apologize. I'll leave it at that.
Well, you do a great job, and it happens. It happens. Other than that, Kathy, do you have any comments? I'm sorry, I should have. Other than that, I have nothing else, so the meeting is adjourned.